Last episode, we saw Rome crush Boudica's revolt and tighten its grip on southern Britain. At that point, Rome looked unstoppable. This was an empire spanning 3 continents, treating the Mediterranean like its own private lake. So you would think Britain would be easy. And in the south, for a time, it was. Rome could build roads, station troops, collect taxes, and pull local elites into its system. It knew how to conquer land, and even more importantly, it knew how to turn conquest into administration. But when the Romans pushed farther north, into what is now Scotland, they ran into a completely different kind of war. No rich cities, no easy conquest, no obvious reward, just mountains, bugs, cold rain, and tribes that refused to fight on Roman terms. For the Roman army, this was a nightmare. Rome was strongest when it could combine discipline, formations, roads, engineering, and logistics into one killing machine. Northern Britain disrupted all of that. Heavy armor slowed soldiers down, supply lines stretched them, road building became harder. Mist and rain destroyed visibility. A Roman legionary up there was less like a conqueror and more like a man sinking into mud, while the land itself fought against him. And then there were the pigs. Their name is often linked to the idea of the painted ones. And to the Romans, they must have seemed almost impossible to pin down. They knew they could not beat Roman legions in a clean open battle, so they didn't try. They used ambushes, night raids, and attacks on supply lines. They struck quickly, killed where they could, and vanished into the fog. This was exactly the kind of war Rome hated most. Rome could still win battles in the north. That was never the real problem. The problem was cost. Every mile gained created another mile to defend, another road to patrol, another supply line to protect. And that is how frontier wars strain empires, not by destroying their armies at once, but by forcing them to spend more and more, for less and less in return. Not a glorious battle, not a final showdown, just endless pressure, constant losses, and a frontier that kept swallowing man. And that was a real problem. Rome did not need to lose a huge battle to be defeated here. It only needed to keep winning at too high a cost. That is how frontiers break empires, not always with one catastrophic defeat, but with years of exhaustion, expense, and frustration. Then came at 122. A new emperor was in charge, Hadrian. Hadrian was not just chasing glory. He was a realist. He understood something many conquerors learned too late. An empire does not become stronger by expanding forever. Sometimes it becomes stronger by knowing where to stop. When Hadrian looked at northern Britain, he saw the truth clearly. Rome was spending men and money to hold land that gave very little back. No rich tax base, no great cities, no prize worth the cost. This was not smart expansion. It was a drain. It was the moment when imperial ambition ran into strategic reality. So Hadrian made a bold decision. Stop here, build a wall, and this was not just a simple wall. It was a full frontier system. Forts, mile castles, watchtowers, roads, gates, and garrisons, stretching roughly 117 kilometers. Hadrian's wall cut across northern England as a visible border of empire. It was military, but it was also political. The wall announced that Rome had drawn a line. South of it was the imperial world, roads, towns, taxes, law, and order. North of it was uncertainty. That contrast mattered because empires do not rule only with swords. They also rule with symbols. And Hadrian's wall was one of Rome's biggest symbols in Britain. To the people beyond it, the wall sent a clear message. This is Rome. You are outside. Imagine stepping out of the dark northern wild and seeing a giant Roman barrier running across the land, guarded by armored soldiers. That was not just defense, it was intimidation. It was Rome turning architecture into a weapon. And it did one more thing. It turned the frontier into something manageable. If raiders crossed, Rome could watch them. If traders crossed, Rome could regulate them. If goods crossed, Rome could tax them. So the wall is also about control, trade, and revenue. That is classic Rome. Defense, administration, and profit, all in one. But life on the wall was miserable for the soldiers. Many came from warmer parts of the empire, including places like Syria and Spain. Now they were stuck in the freezing wind and mud of northern Britain. For these men, Hadrian's wall was not some grand imperial idea. It was a cold stain, a cold one. At places like Vindolanda, archaeologists have found writing tablets that preserve fragments of their daily lives, letters, requests, lists, and personal messages. They remind us that Rome's frontier was not held only by heroes and generals, but by tired, cold, ordinary people far from home, trying to survive another winter at the edge of the empire. That may be one of the strangest truths about Rome. From a distance, it looks like marble, discipline, and grandeur. Up close, it is also paperwork, complaints, damp barracks, and men hoping someone remembered to send proper clothing. And for a long time, the system worked. South of the wall, Roman Britain continued. Roads connected the province. Towns grew, trade moved, bathhouses steamed. Life, at least in the south, carried on under Roman order for generations. Rome gave Britain something brutal, unequal, and deeply exploitative, but also structured. And once people get used to structure, they rarely notice how much they depend on it until it disappears. But no empire lasts forever. By the early 5th century, Rome was under pressure across Europe, and Britain became harder to defend. Troops were withdrawn, support weakened, the frontier frayed. Then, in 410, Roman rule in Britain effectively ended. The legions were gone, and Britain, once protected by Rome, was left to face the future alone. For generations, Rome had been the system, holding everything together. Now that system was gone. The roads remained, the walls remained, the ruins remained, but the power behind them had vanished. That is the haunting part of Roman Britain. The infrastructure survived, but the certainty did not. Beyond the old frontier, old enemies remained, and from the sea, new threats were coming. Britain was about to enter a darker, more uncertain age, a world of ruins, fractured kingdoms, and rising legends. And that is where our next chapter begins. Because after Rome, Britain would begin telling a new story, one of survival, collapse, memory, and a king who may have existed only in legend. Arthur, see you next time.